pasta? Pasta from a pine tree? Yeah, you bet. And it's really delicious too. I'm going to show you an easy and flexible way that I make a home-style pasta with pine pollen. But first, welcome to Haphazard Homestead. I'm glad you're here. If you enjoy plants, wild or from a garden too, please consider subscribing. This recipe will work with pollen from any real pine tree in the genus Pinus, or really any tree in the whole pine family, like spruce trees or fir trees too. I already have a video on how to pick and process pine pollen. I'll put a link to it down in the video description below and in a card towards the end of this video. Once you have your pine pollen, making the pasta is easy. I'm using a half cup of white flour and adding the same amount of pine pollen. Pine pollen has such a light and fluffy texture. It's like superfine flour. But pasta does need gluten, so there has to be some regular wheat flour in this too. I am certainly not a fancy pasta chef, but for this recipe it doesn't matter at all. You can see I just make a well in the center of the flour and add 1 egg plus 1 egg yolk. Then I start mixing everything together little by little. I add some olive oil depending on how the dough seems to be coming together. The key is to knead the dough for about 10 minutes to bring out all the gluten in the wheat flour. It's enjoyable because the pine pollen smells so good. You can see that I did not use all the flour. That's okay because I'll make pancakes with what I have left over, but that's a subject for another video. When I'm done kneading the dough, I wrap it tightly in a plastic bag to let sit for at least a half hour. That's a good time to get everything else ready that you want to eat with the pine pollen pasta. It would be easy to swamp out the pine pollen flavor with a lot of sauce or with a strong flavored sauce. Instead, keep it simple. Then it's time to roll out the dough and cut the noodles. It's so much easier to do in small parts rather than trying to roll out all the dough in one big batch. I'm making Homestyle noodles here because they are so simple and don't need any special equipment. But if you have a pasta maker, you can use that for sure. When I was a kid in public school in southeast Kansas, our lunch ladies made home-style noodles from scratch, and they air-dried all the noodles on towels laid out on top of the cafeteria tables. They were such good noodles. I'm doing the same kind of thing here, just rolling the dough and then cutting it into strips. It is smarter to lay the noodles out on a towel and not on top of each other, but I got distracted in making this video. To cook the noodles, I boil some water with some salt in it, just like you would do for any pasta. It takes about 3 to 5 minutes for the noodles to cook. Then I drain them and lightly toss with a little olive oil. That's all there is to it. This pine pollen pasta is great with a little Parmesan cheese, or you can make it more fancy. Here, I had them with steamed bristly hawksbeard greens and fermented redbud flowers, some fresh white rose petals sliced thin, and some wild puffball mushrooms cooked with elephant garlic and white wine. That pine pollen comes through so well. You do not want to cover it up with cheese. Man, that is so good. I hope you get a chance to make some pine pollen pasta sometime. And if you make anything else with pine pollen, I'd love to hear about it in the comments below. Thanks for watching. Bye. You can really taste that pollen at the end. You do not want to cover this up with tomato sauce and a lot of other flavors. Leave that by itself. Wow.